All right, so I'm going to read this one. So I feel like I've read a lot of case law that contradicts each other, and I've heard two different answers. As far as using a police canine to sniff a vehicle on private property versus parking lot versus a suspicious vehicle occupied, parked not on the roadway, etc., when is it acceptable to search after a canine indication, and when is it not okay to search without a search warrant? Since the search warrant exception only applies to vehicles that can be moved before a search warrant is obtained, correct. Right, inherent mobility. Okay, yep, we're there with that one. I'm a canine handler, and I'm really looking for clarity and the answers so that I can prove the right way to my unit and fellow officers and continue to train that into future handlers. Okay, so that's the answer.
Okay.
That's the question. I'm sorry, Mike.
Question. So I guess the first, we kind of already covered the do I need a warrant part already. I mean, if it's a vehicle, and again, this is the Fourth Amendment answer. You know, there could be a few states that may require a search warrant, but if you're in a position to deploy your dog around the vehicle, assuming you're lawfully in that position to begin with, wherever the vehicle is parked, if you're allowed to be right there to walk the dog, and the dog alerts to the vehicle, and you have the requisite training to show how reliable he is, at least for purposes of probable cause, then you can search it without a warrant. The dog is essentially telling you you've got now probable cause to believe there are narcotics or drugs or illegal substances in that vehicle. You don't need a search warrant under the automobile exception. The inherent mobility of the vehicle, not the actual mobility of the vehicle or the potential mobility of the vehicle, that's not what triggers the automobile exception. It's the fact that vehicles are by their nature mobile, and also coupled with the reduced expectation of privacy in vehicles. That's what justifies the search without a warrant. We don't have to show that there's any associated time-sensitive exigency. So it could be an unoccupied vehicle that your dog alerts to. You can search it without a warrant under the automobile exception with the probable cause provided by the dog.
When we talk about inherent mobility, would we be correct in understanding that a car that has no engine is probably not going to fall under the automobile exception? Make it very clear.
Yes, that's where we've moved beyond inherent mobility. No engine, no wheels on the vehicle. Yeah. Then you're probably going to need a search warrant unless there is an actual exigency that you can point to, an actual sensitivity.
And you and I, just even on this topic, I'm going to ask you another question regarding this because I know what this guy's asking his questions, what he really needs clarity on. We talked about a car that's crashed into a pole and now is no longer mobile. It's broken axles, the whole thing, tires deflated. This car will never drive again. Is that something that's going to fall into the automobile exception?
Generally, yeah, it does. The few cases that I've ever seen where that was the issue, where that was the sole basis for the search. You know, we weren't towing it, so there's no inventory basis. It's solely the automobile exception. The court said, well, it was just recently being operated on the roadway, therefore the automobile exception still applies in that case. Yeah, so you search without a warrant.
And do you think that SCOTUS, if it ever made it, to me, that in my mind as we're having this conversation, that sounds like something that SCOTUS might hear or something like that, and might interpret it differently. So would you ever think that, and again, I'm just asking you, maybe that circumstance to ever err on the side of caution, I hate saying that word, but like, you think it's a scenario where it probably wouldn't hurt to get a warrant maybe, or?
Well, so I guess two things. Let me talk about the if does it hurt to get a warrant, and then the SCOTUS issue. Supreme Court of the United States, those of you who don't know what we're referring to. It never hurts to get a warrant. That's a true statement. It's never legally incorrect to get a search warrant. When it comes to searching cars and the automobile exception, my position on when a search warrant should be obtained and when you're unsure, it's when you're unsure of your probable cause. If you're questioning whether the facts that you have rise to the level of probable cause, then it would be wise to seek a search warrant from a judge or a magistrate to verify the existence of your probable cause. If you know you have probable cause and you're questioning whether this vehicle falls under the automobile exception to do it without a warrant, we've already established that probably 99% of the vehicles that you encounter are going to fall under the exception. So if the question is about the mobility of the vehicle, I don't really see any really good reason to go get a search warrant because you're just spending time doing something you don't need to. But if you're questioning your existence of probable cause, that's when I think it would be appropriate to go to get a warrant.
Okay, cool.
All right. So as far as the Supreme Court revisiting the issue about the crash car, I'm inclined to think that there aren't a whole lot of points under the automobile exception that have left that are unexplored by the Supreme Court. They've been very clear in their almost 100 years of automobile exception jurisprudence that a warrant is just not required for searching cars when you have probable cause. We're left with these little unique fact situations like the one that you pointed out, the crashed car, the vehicle on curtilage, which I'll touch on in just a second. So I think the court would be pretty disinclined to revisit another automobile exception issue. They're definitely not going to overturn or change the course of the automobile exception. You got 100 years of case law supporting it. Yeah. So I doubt they would take that case.
As far as going, you said before, being in a legal place to sniff a car, essentially we're kind of discussing Illinois v. Caballes a little bit. A dog sniff is not being a violation of the Fourth Amendment. So this free air sniff title that a lot of people misinterpret. So if you're looking to understand what a free air sniff is, Illinois v. Caballes, 2015. Is it 2015 for Caballes? 2011?
Rodriguez was 2015. Yeah. It was a little before that.
2011, I think it was Caballes.
That sounds about right, yeah.
They discuss sniffing cars without reasonable suspicion. And again, some states say yes, a majority of states say that's fine. A minority, for example, Pennsylvania, you're not deploying a dog without reasonable suspicion in any circumstance. They're not allowed to do them. I want to say Minnesota as well. I could be wrong, but I haven't read it in a while. I've been there, and I'll be going there in August, and I'll have a better understanding of that when I get there. As far as being in a legal place now, we've established that you can use the dog. You can sniff without any prerequisite. When we talk about legal place, is a driveway a legal place?
With your dog, no. So here's where the distinction comes into. So the court has drawn a distinction between residential curtilage and just private property, publicly accessible private property in general. So for example, a motel parking lot, that is clearly private property, but it's publicly accessible private property. And just as anyone who hasn't been expressly banned from that property, but anyone in general can just walk onto that parking lot, walk or drive onto that parking lot. And a police officer can do the same. And whether he has a dog with him or not, does not implicate the Fourth Amendment interests of the owner of the property, nor it clearly doesn't implicate the Fourth Amendment interest of the people visiting that property, the customers. But the court does draw a line at residential curtilage, a case out of 2013, Florida versus Jardinus, where the court held that merely bringing a drug dog onto residential curtilage, doesn't matter what part it is, the driveway, the front porch, or the side, backyard, doesn't matter. That act by itself is a search. Therefore, you would need either consent, a search warrant, or probable cause plus some kind of exigency in order to do that. Now, the officer can walk up the driveway to the front door without express consent because there's that implied societal license that anyone can do that, walk up the front door or front walkway and knock on the door. But by bringing a drug dog onto the scene, the court held in Jardinus that exceeds that societal license to enter curtilage. So no, you cannot just bring a dog on curtilage and sniff a car in a driveway, for example, without a warrant or an exigency or consent.
If you were walking up that driveway, let's talk about two different scenarios. The first one is maybe you get a tip. Hey, I think John on the corner in the red house is selling narcotics. And maybe as a police officer, you're just going to walk up on the driveway and walk to John's front door, knock on the door, and ask him about his, maybe listen, nobody's looking into it. I'm going to go there and patrol. It's a small agency. I'm going to go knock on the door and see if I see anything. As you walk up there, you look inside the car that's parked in the driveway, and through the window, you see a quantity of narcotics, illegal narcotics. Let's call it methamphetamine, an ounce of methamphetamine sitting on the floorboard of the car. Would you be authorized to search that vehicle?
Without a warrant?
Yeah.
Absolutely. Hands down.
Okay.
No question about it. Under the automobile exception. As long as it's an apparently operable vehicle. It's got four wheels on it. Looks like a normal functioning car. Yes. I'm in a lawful position in this case. I'm allowed to be where I am on the driveway for the very reason you mentioned. Going to do a knock and talk for all intents and purposes. And I happen to see in the vehicle, as long as it's immediately apparent to be methamphetamine, then there's my probable cause. And yeah, I can search without a warrant. Don't need a search warrant.
What if you walked up? What if somebody said to you, hey, he leaves his drugs out in that car, right? I'm just letting you know. So if you walk up and look in that car in that driveway, you're going to see the drugs in there. And you walk up with that purpose to walk up and look inside the car. Is that a little different?
That is a little different, and that's going to cause some issues. We got Collins. I'll call it the Collins issue, Collins versus Virginia, where the court held that the entry onto residential curtilage for the sole purpose of conducting a search of the vehicle under the automobile exception violates the Fourth Amendment. Now here we're going to get into the subjective state of mind of the officer. What is it the officer is intending to do? Is he intending to go on there for the purpose of searching the vehicle, or is he going on there for the purpose of just trying to verify the tip about the vehicle? There's an argument that we could make that, but in that case, we're going to be running into some issues about our lawful presence on the property.
So walking up and inadvertently seeing something is very different than walking up and purposely looking for something.
Yes, absolutely. An inadvertent discovery while we're lawfully there for some other reason, hands down, all day long, we can search that vehicle. It's the purpose for being on the property that is going to come into play. Yeah.
What if you get a good, reliable source of information who tells you, hey, there's a kilo in the trunk of that car, and then the reliable source, I don't know, maybe not the most reliable, and I'm going to say this in one way, not enough to establish a probable cause to support a search warrant. And you are under the belief that, hey, we should really look into this. What do we do in that situation where time is a factor? We have somebody who we think maybe maybe is offering some real interesting facts. We have veracity. We have corroboration. And they say there's a kilo of cocaine in the trunk of that car in that driveway. Are you guys going to do something about it? Now what do we do? Besides the knock and talk, is there ever a time that we can, let's say we call a judge and say, the judge says, yeah, you look, I know what your source of information is. I don't think it's enough to support a warrant. Can we ever bring a dog on to sniff that car with that reasonable suspicion to try to go get a search warrant?
I'm inclined to think, just kind of off the top of my head, I don't know. A search warrant to conduct a search, which the entry onto the property would be the search, is going to have to be based on probable cause. So our informant is going to have to establish probable cause, and you've already said that he doesn't. And I'm assuming maybe it's because he doesn't know. How does he know there's drugs in there? So we would need probable cause to search the car already to be able to get the dog on the property with a warrant in that case. So it sounds like a knock and talk probably would be the only thing. With the dog, we have to leave the dog in the truck, on the side of the road.
Or I guess you just have to sit on the car and wait till the car leaves and then pull the car over.
Let him leave. Yeah, let him leave and pull him over, and then we're everybody's fair game then.
What if you're watching, let's say you got narcotics set up on the house and you're watching, the guy comes out and grabs a package out of the trunk. What do you do then? Like, oh shit, is that the kilo?
I could argue that, with the same tip that you just mentioned.
Yeah, earlier. The same tip. Hey, look, we're going to set up. Listen, the judge said our judge is a little weird. He doesn't like, he's a nervous Nelly. We're going to set up on his house and just watch this car. It sounds like a good job for this narcotics division. A kilogram is something we've never gotten before. And they send the guy out there and he's sitting and watching. Yeah. And 2 hours later, a gentleman comes out, goes into the trunk and grabs this package out and starts walking inside. What do we got then?
I'd probably maybe an exigency. So I would try, and we need to get him before he goes into the house. I think we can definitely do a Terry stop on him on his driveway. And then going back to our tip, we probably have, it sounds like we've got probable cause to believe those are drugs. We're now lawfully on the property. We're on the property for purposes of conducting a Terry stop, not for searching the vehicle. Mm-hmm. So one, we can search that package without a warrant, probably under an exigency theory, and then we can now search the vehicle, I would think, for more drugs potentially. If he gets inside the house, we could argue perhaps a destruction of evidence type of an exigency that could forego a warrant requirement. But yeah, once that tip has confirmed to the level of probable cause by him bringing those drugs out of the vehicle, or what we suspect to be drugs, that changes the game a little bit. I don't know that we would really need a dog for anything, or our eyes are giving us the probable cause coupled with the tip.
This is important. This is why I say knowing sources of information is so important.